Ladies and gentlemen, welcome today to our football panel, Football on the World Stage, What About Africa? This event is organized by Expotel in partnership with Qatar, CSE, HBKU University, and AIPS Africa. I would like to invite our moderator for our first panel, Dr. Gerard Akindis from Northwestern University, Qatar. And for our speakers, I would like to invite Dr. Camila Swart from CSE HBKU. I would like to invite Councillor Hossein Abou Ala, Chairman of Al Ahli Fans Association in Qatar. And our VIP guest, Mr. Lakulu September from CAF. Dr. Mitchell Obi, President from AIPS Africa, is on his way, but we will start and he will catch us later. So let's welcome our speakers and guests today. And let's start our first panel.
Okay. Hello. Okay. Thank you, Nada. Good morning. We are going to start our first panel. I have a quick introduction of each panelist. I'll start with Dr. Camila. Dr. Camila is Director of a Master of Science and Sports and Entertainment and Associate Professor at the College of Science and Engineering at Hamad bin Khalifa University. It is one of the universities in Qatar, part of the Qatar Foundation. She's also Senior Research Associate, School of Tourism and Hospitality at University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Dr. Camila research includes sports and event tourism, particularly mega events, sustainability, legacy, and inclusion in sports. She worked on and her work has been focusing on how sport contribute to tourism and events knowledge in the developing context, Global South. I think we should welcome Dr. Camila, and I'll introduce now Councillor Osam Abu Al-Ola. He's he graduated from the Faculty of Law, Mansoura University in 1998, and completed it with his postgraduate studies until he obtained his doctorate in law. He has been working in the state of Qatar for 20 years, during which he held many positions in the legal field and stakeholder management of major projects in the state of Qatar. What is very important with Councillor Osam Abu Al-Ola, he is the executive or the leader of Al Ahli fan clubs in Qatar. Al Ahli is for Africa one of the oldest clubs. 1906, I think, was created, 07. And also, for the past 10, 12 years, the club that won almost all the African Champions League. He is an important element of African football. I will introduce Luke's September. I cannot say his full name in his Hosa. Okay. I'm disabled with South African languages. Luke's September manages the biggest media rights in Africa. CAF has the biggest media rights on the continent. As head of CAF Broadcasting since May 2022. The African Cup of Nations is the single biggest event on the African continent, with 494 million viewers for the past African Cup of Nations in Cameroon. Welcome all of you. Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell on stage, please. I'll introduce Dr. Mitchell while he's getting his seat. Mitchell Obi is a frontline member of the AIPS, International Association of Sport Press, Executive Committee since 2005, and President of AIPS Africa, Africa Sport Journalists Union, and Vice President of AIPS. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much, and I really have to apologize for really making it late. Actually, I've been on my live show, and so it's been difficult to connect between the show and, okay, the mic is supposed to be on. Thank you. First of all, let me register my apologies for coming late. It was not intentional. I was early, but I was hooked on my live program, and I was talking about Africa, and that's what's the big thing about it. And so it's my delight to be here and to meet some of my very good colleagues. Lux is here. Lux, nice to really get to feel you once more again. And of course, this is a very good place. I like the setting as I came in. So thank you very much for all the introduction, even though I was not here.
Thank you. I think I'll start with Lux because he has a meeting, he told me. Yes?
I must start with the professor.
Okay, or Mitchell. Or Mitchell has started already.
Yes.
Okay. I'll quickly tell you what this panel is about. The panel is about African football. You can see it's everywhere. And African football participation at FIFA World Cup. This World Cup is now 50 years since Africa has been qualifying directly to the World Cup. I think 72 or 70. Morocco was the first one to qualify. And this panel is about how Africa is on the stage, the global stage, at the FIFA World Cup and more. And it's a discussion mostly to create awareness about African football, the challenges and opportunities from different areas of expertise. Each panelist is going to present various aspects of how African football is standing with many successes, but also challenges on the global stage from the global south. This is what the discussion will be about. And I'll start with Michel. He's a media person. Media and journalism have been transforming rapidly. My question to Michel is how Africa is coping with this fast pace of media today, and how Africa is capable or not capable of building capacity in that field. Michel.
Yeah, thank you. And at least let me say that there is a sense of optimism in the continent, given what we have seen so far in Qatar. For the first time after 2 games for every participating country, Africa still has the hope of getting into the next round, and that's happening for the first time ever since we started our endeavor of hoping to join the exclusive club of 10 countries that have won the World Cup so far. No African is there, and I think that's the good start for Africa, that after 2 games we are still fully hopeful, confident, and then after 3 games for some, Africa also has a place in the round of 16, and that's good too. If you look at our records of the past, it doesn't suggest that we've come this kind of impressions, getting into where it matters, and I think it's a good one. Our hope is to see if all the African teams can get into the next round. That would be another good record. But then the thing to talk about Africa here is that for the first time also, Africa is coming to this competition with totally indigenous robe there is no foreign content in the composition of the team, in the management of the team, and so every win Africa gets here is essentially African, and it helps us to assess totally and comprehensively how we've gone far in terms of putting a team together and in terms of getting this team to measure up against other continental opposition and get to where it matters, which is winning the World Cup. Will it be the first time for Africa to win the World Cup? If you ask me today, I can look up in the sky and say, impossible is nothing. But the joy of it all is that at least the Africans here who have come for this competition are not disappointed. They are optimistic, and they say hope will live. But let's come to what Africa has done in the past. I remembered my own country when we made our mark in 1994 in the World Cup in the United States. Indeed, that team was described as the most expressive team to have featured in the World Cup with the kind of football they played. They even beat a team that went on to win, to reach the semi-final of that same competition. And everyone remembers the game against Italy, a game in the second round which will have catapulted Nigeria to the quarterfinals. For Africa, the benchmark has been the quarterfinals, and I hope we can get beyond that this time. And we've had 3 teams that have so far gone to that stage, starting, of course, with Cameroon. Cameroon has a very impressive record in the World Cup in terms of how they do, but there's been a lull for quite a while since the glorious days of the 80s and the 90s. Here was a Cameroon team in their first outing in the World Cup in '82. They drew all their games and drew even with the eventual champions Italy. That was an African team without even foreign players then. There were very, very few. And that was the 1982 team. They played a draw with Italy, who eventually won the World Cup. You remember the story. And then in 1990, where they shocked the defending champions, France, inside the San Siro Stadium. That was Cameroon, vintage Cameroon, playing the direct kind of football which many people have identified with them. Of course, it didn't end there. They went out in the quarterfinal losing to England. And interestingly, the English will be taking on an African team this time. For some of us, it will be time for us to perhaps look for that, I don't want to say revenge in the spirit of fair play. Look for an opportunity to give one back to them. Oh yes, England against Senegal this weekend, it's a tantalizing one. Of course, you have a runners-up team in Europe taking on the African champions, and it will measure up. Now let's come to other countries. Senegal, which is here making the mark. When they made their first outing in the World Cup, it was beating France. France were champions. They were beaten, first game. And it's only good that only yesterday, the guy who scored that goal was celebrated by the captain of the team. Many people have not forgotten how he got that one goal against France, although he's joined the great team upstairs. So Africa is innocent when it comes to the World Cup history, but we've had some moments to cherish, and I think all of that gradually coming to a certain crystallization, which if we fully harness, we may be where we want to be. And perhaps Qatar should be the place. Little doubt when Qatar was bidding for this World Cup, they said part of their legacy will be to give some of the stadia, dismantle some of the modular stadium, and Africa will be their best bet. I think it's that kind of sense of partnership, that relationship, that spirit is really getting lively. And I think it will be a thing of joy to see Africa get where it matters. And of course, at the end of the day also, we'll say that Qatar was the place.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to you. Now, next question will be to Loxo. And you are managing the biggest property, media property, broadcasting property in sport on the continent, the African Cup of Nations. How does it work, and how are you managing to bring the African football to the global stage through broadcasting? what are the challenges and what are the opportunities in that field, bringing the African football to the world. Every 2 years, till we change it eventually.
Good morning. Thank you. One more. Can I start again? False start. But you'll forgive me because we started late. The match was at 11 o'clock, Dr. Obi. In Africa, we kick off on time. It's really an honor to be here today, and I'm not going to talk to you about stats. My learned friend here knows better than that about goals. I really want to talk to young Africans about values. I put that quote behind me. I think you guys can see. I requested that they put that quote behind me when I'm going to speak. It's from a lady from Nigeria, called Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The quote reads, so she delivers a lecture. When you've got time, go to YouTube, find it. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. In one of the quotes she says, the single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. The consequence of a single story is this: it robs people of their dignity. It makes our recognition of equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different more than how we are similar. I represent a continent that has suffered from a single story, Africa. Some of the things we see every day, of course, are true. Famine, hopelessness, wars. But there is another side of Africa. There's another young group of young Africans who are emerging, who are thinking more about Africa from a solution-driven point of view. In my own country, we hosted the World Cup in 2010. Why did we host the World Cup? It was not a football event for us. It was an opportunity to brand Africa differently, to say that we Africans don't need anyone else, because aid has been coming to Africa since the 1960s, since the 1940s, since the 50s. It has not developed Africa, right? Now we need to change course. We need to think sustainability. We need to think about coming up with our own solutions. I'm an entrepreneur, my other background, besides working in sport, having the privilege of working in different sporting events, including 3 World Cups. I own a potato farm in South Africa. Yes, we do farm and we do football. And one of the things potato farming has taught me over the years is process equals results. There's no magic in potato farming. Everything is purely process-driven. Now, what about Africa today? I arrived at CAF last year. You all know the problems of CAF. When people talk about CAF, they talk about African football. He even, good intention as he is, says we must benefit from stadiums from Qatar. Maybe that's good. It's a good gesture, but we must build our own things. We must develop our own things ourselves. This is only going to come true if we think about independence. Independence is not shouting slogans, Viva, great, let's do it, let's be free. True freedom means developing your own product, controlling it. In my own country, where I come from, South Africa, which has the biggest league commercially in Africa, we refuse to take any grant anywhere because we want to build our own football. When we came to football last year, when there was a change of leadership at CAF, there's a man in charge of African football who takes not a cent from football. When he arrived at football, Dr. Patrice Motsepe gave CAF $10 million to say, I want us to develop the youth, because the youth is the future. We see football as a platform that can transform our continent, not through words. Now, what has been done in the last 2 minutes, I want to talk about what has been done. Let's look at what he said when he arrived in March, April last year, and what has happened now. He promised that he's going to prioritize women's football development. Well, last year there was the first Women's Champions League that was played on African soil. That is a commercially viable product to develop women's football. He promised to transform refereeing in Africa and introduce VAR. For the first time, all the 52 matches of AFCON were on VAR. For the first time, all the 28 matches at Women's AFCON were on VAR. For the first time, the Women's Champions League that just finished, all 16 matches were on VAR. For the first time, all the qualifiers of the World Cup were on VAR. He promised to invest in governance, good governance, because he's an entrepreneur, he cannot risk his name. On his first day at CAF, he commissioned the PwC report, and the implementation of this is ongoing. Are we a perfect place? We are not. But we are trying to change the single story about who we are. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't need to be in football, to be honest. But I understand the value and the power of football in giving people the confidence to transform their societies. So that is all what we want to achieve in the next 4 years that we are at football. And I need the African media to come on board. Not only to praise me or Motsepe or anyone else and say they are great leaders. By the way, when we are doing terrible things, we should be criticized. But the media cannot take an adversarial role. They must understand their role in building their brands, in building industries. The Western world media does write about negative things about the West, but they understand the value of promoting the EPL. We've been conditioned to think that it's the best league. Why can't we do this about ourselves? Where is an African media platform that talks to Africans about Africa today? Now I ask these questions to young Africans because as an entrepreneur, I believe in solutions and processes. I ask you as academics who are here today to think about how in your little space as the fans, how you can talk positively, not PR, I don't need PR, positively about changing the face of our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we stay in South Africa. Dr. Camilla. Camilla, I'll ask you just a question in your area. You've been involved in 2010 World Cup in terms of research, sustainability, and legacy. Now you are involved in the 2022 World Cup. What are the lessons you think Africa brought to Qatar, and what lessons Qatar will take back to Africa in terms of sustainability and how tourism can reinforce sport, and sport can reinforce tourism on our continent?
Thank you, Jira. Thank you. Here we go. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, everybody. It's been a great honor to be part of this event and this panel. As Gerard has said, my background in this field has really been established around the research agenda for 2010 FIFA World Cup. And just to give it some context, it was about, obviously, in all the contestation about opportunity costs for a developing country to host a World Cup. The questions were asked, you know, should South Africa be considering hosting a World Cup? And within that space, I was working in as an academic in sport, and really looking at the transition or the unequal distribution of sport mega events globally, with very little sport mega events and the World Cup in particular in emerging contexts or a developing context like South Africa, with our first World Cup in Africa. And the challenge I posed to myself was to develop and contribute to knowledge building and knowledge transfer coming from Africa. Up to that point, most of the academic literature was focused on Western examples, World Cups in Europe, and here was our opportunity to claim our space, to build knowledge and to contribute. And I've continued that journey, and I came to a different part of the world pushing a research agenda, because as important it is for us to host these events, and to it is as important to assess the impacts and legacies. So from my experience in South Africa, it was really about changing perceptions, using the opportunity, just as we've seen here in Qatar, using this opportunity as the first World Cup in a Muslim country, a first World Cup in the Middle East, and how Qatar has taken that opportunity to change perceptions. It was the same for South Africa. The constant barrage of negative criticism about our capabilities, our issues, those negative stereotypes about crime, age, HIV/AIDS, Afro-pessimism, and how we use the World Cup to turn it around. And today, 12 years on, there is more distinction, a greater distinction in terms of assessing impacts versus assessing legacy. And if there was ever a legacy that we need to learn and need to take forward from South Africa to Qatar and going forward to 2036 to see another World Cup in Africa, is that we need to maximize those opportunities and leverage the opportunities, whether we are in academia, whether we are in media, and whether we are on that field refereeing players. It's about each and every one of us and the contribution we make to changing those perceptions, claiming our rightful place, but making our own individual contributions, and our partnerships and our collaborations needs to continue. And from my perspective, representing academia today here, along with Dr. Gerald, it goes back to building and contributing and building capacity with the next generation. So I'm very pleased to say that just as in South Africa, we contributed to a research agenda, the same here, we continue to build local capacity, and we continue to build, and with local, I mean in your own space where you find, whether you're in Qatar, whether you're in Ghana, whether you're in Senegal, whether you're in Cameroon or South Africa, we can continue to share knowledge, contribute, and build that next generation. So if there was any lesson that I think we need to take into 2036, it's continue to share and claim our space, but make our contributions and make them heard.
Before you hand the mic, can you be more specific about 2036? What is going to happen?
Well, I think that's a question for counseling here.
I will come to that question.
But just let me say this, reflecting on 2010 FIFA World Cup, having gone from the global south, right at the bottom of Africa, to I'm confident that we will get another World Cup in Africa with 2036. I think where we are in the global geopolitical landscape we find ourselves in now, a bid by the MENA region is not going to be without its challenges, as we have seen in terms of the Qatar case. But in terms of sharing that, the vision is more directly related to Councillor's comments on the bid from Egypt.
Okay. Egypt is bidding with Saudi Arabia and Greece for the next World Cup.
Yes, true.
And my question to you, Councillor Osam, it's as a Halali football, not just fun. You are more than a fan now.
Yes.
Yes, and knowing how important fun is to the game.
Exactly.
I think they represent the core of the game, no matter how we want to look at it. Tell us a little bit about why is it so important, and what Africa should be proud of with Al-Ali and the fans, and eventually what to learn from it to bring football, African football, to the world.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First of all, I would like to thank you guys for this event, and I hope that this will not be the last one. This is a very special event for Africa, and I hope that this will continue for a series of similar events until we achieve. If we believe that African or Africa can do better, so we have to work for it until we achieve it. And there was a question we have spoken about before we start, that someone says that we have no choice, we are an African. But I said,
even if we have different choice, I will choose to be an African. So if I believe in that, we will achieve. I think our problem lands in Africa, in us. We have to work for it, believe ourselves, and we will achieve. And from your question, you have said, or you started with, would we see one day an African team will win the World Cup or not? I will answer that question with some other questions that clarifies where we stand and why we are here. Who won the Ballon d'Or this year? Where he came from? Who's the most expensive player in the world right now? Kimpembe. Okay. Where he came from? Okay. Now in this World Cup in Qatar, we know that only 5 African teams are participants. But how many African players are making differences with European teams participating, and most of them are qualified now? If we answer these questions, we know why we are here, and also will be, or we believe that we can do better, and we can win, or one African team can win the World Cup very soon. So I think the answer to those questions can clarify a lot, but we'll come to the fact that until now, only one time South Africa has hosted the World Cup, which is unfortunate for Africa. We are the second biggest continent population and land size. However, we are still so far and beyond what we deserve to be. So another thing I have to clarify here, that for the time being, average of 3,500 African players are playing in Europe. Europe represented in the World Cup by 13 teams, while Africa represented by only 5. These are questions we need to answer. We need to work for it. So I will go to the point of the bid of Egypt, and personally, I'm against the joint bid. I'm against it, 100%. Why I do a joint bid? While me representing Al Ahly fans and my country, Egypt, I'm confident that Egypt can host the World Cup alone, and will be one of a kind, and will be the best ever. So I'm against the idea of hosting or submitting a joint bid, because me as representing Egypt and an African country, okay, I have to believe that I can do it alone. So I have nothing much to say about it, because I'm against the idea of the joint bid, really. And this is also, I think you agree with me, guys, that not only South Africa, we were all of us proud that South African has hosted the 2010 World Cup. It was extremely successful, and we were, aiming that this will lead to another African countries to host. But now let's take it from the different side of the continent, the Middle East or the MENA region, and the Arab country, which is Qatar. We are here now, and Qatar has done something unbelievable by hosting this World Cup. So let's take it from there and build up from here, and what has South Africa achieved in 2010, and move further. And if we believe it, we will do it. So this is what I can say for now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
I just want to find a different perspective from what you've said. The world is fast changing, and there are different dynamics, especially when it comes to the politics, which is what we are not even playing. Yes. And the politics is key because leadership is commitment. And if leadership is not deliberate, even the visioning may be suspect. And I think that's where Africa falls short. I want to think that the solution is all of us. Even if we go for joint bids, the dynamic is that at least we are part of the equation. And
joint bids from Africa.
Yeah, even joint bids from Africa.
I'm with that view.
Joint bids from Africa, but even joint bids from Africa. Let's take even the South African example. 2010, South Africa was a hidden secret for some of us, and because of the Western media, we thought South Africa was something you couldn't really get to enjoy. But after the World Cup, we found out that was a jewel that has been staying perhaps on scene for quite a while, and when it was exposed, it illuminated every corner, and some of us were thoroughly enamored by what we saw in South Africa. We were engineered, and we said, Africa is still the virgin territory. Africa needs to expose herself. Africa needs to go all out, just like using the football canvas. Now we have values which my very good friend has talked about, values which we can protect and defend, but it's also time for us to go beyond attack. Just put it in the form of a football game. It's time for us to attack. And that attack has to come from first the political dimension. We have to again come to the economic dimension. You cannot take away all these
Sure.
elements. They are very key if we want to make any impression.
Exactly.
And when it comes to the political dynamics, what has happened to South Africa after hosting the World Cup? What has South Africa done with Africa to give Africa with fresh energy so that another African country can find the basis to even aspire? That's a big question which South Africans themselves have not answered. And Lux is here. He knows our thinking about what South Africa has not done right when it comes to getting Africa united in forging a purposeful front to not only make the world understand that Africa is coming in unity. Of course, that is a question of leadership. I know that it's a question of leadership, how leadership aspires. Even in CAF, the body ruling football today, we are saying that we have seen in the past an African aspiring to be FIFA president, even going to a contest and challenging for the office of the FIFA presidency, coming too close. We have seen an African manage FIFA at an acting capacity as FIFA president. We should also be thinking in that dynamics. We shouldn't be the ones carrying the portfolio and saying that let's have only somebody from the West who can come and pick from Africa to follow. We need to show that we are independent, and that independence is not just protecting our values; it's also attacking what we think is our strength in positioning.
Thank you.
100% agree with you.
What we'll do, we started a little bit late. We'll engage the conversation now with the audience. If anyone has a short comment, short questions, we have to go short to try to take 3 or 4 questions and then wrap up. Then we can try to catch up with our timing. Question, I think I need to get the mic down. Somebody should hold it. Can someone? Yeah. Thank you, guys. Who has a question?
Which one?
Yes, you can take it.
Hello, everyone. To be honest, I'm so happy to be with you today. So I wrote some notes here. So the first thing I would like to ask, the first gentleman, about something related to the performance. You have mentioned that the African they were performing very well in the World Cup or any sport. So I do agree with you. So when it comes to some countries, we can see the best players in the world, they are from Africa. So when you go to some Europe countries or United States even, you find the African people, especially the immigrants, they perform very well and they win in all kind of the sport. But the question here, do African like teams and the World Cup, like when it goes to the soccer or football, do they miss like the champion culture? So being like the champion of the World Cup or like anything, because they do very well like in the World Cup, even like for females or males, but that's like happened to the Asian countries too. Like so, if they don't feel, I feel like this, in my opinion, they don't have like the champion culture to be like the one who wins the World Cup. They go up to the round 16, round 8, but they don't go like to the final. So this is the first concern. And the second one, like I would like to ask you like about the development. You have mentioned like hosting the World Cup or any mega events kind of bring like many things like to the countries. I would like to, I'm agree with you, but like we have like to ask ourselves like what do you want to develop like in Africa? Do you want to develop like the society, the environment, or like to be like a modern country? So here's like the concern, like when you want like to, in my opinion, like in some countries, want to develop like to focus like about what they want to bring like to the country. So we can have an example of South Africa. They hosted like the World Cup. So the legacy was like I wasn't like I'm not totally familiar like about the legacy of South Africa like the hosting. But I would like to know, did they still like have a good legacy and a good benefits from hosting the World Cup? And as I know now, they are planning like South Africa to host the Women World Cup like 2027. So did they learn like from the past and they want to like to improve what they have missed like in the past? So those are my concerns, and thank you.
Yeah, I cannot but align with your thoughts. We must have a paradigm shift, so to speak, a mindset adjustment. We need that more than anything. We must be thinking of a champion Africa, not just trying to be second fiddle. But then that depends on what you have. You have to give what you have. If you don't have anything, what do you give? For me, it's as simple as that. I come from a country where the political landscape doesn't allow us to find the right kind of energy, even with the resources we have. So it's a problem. It's a problem which I want to believe if we can surmount, we may come halfway to finding the right direction. Leadership is key. Leadership is influence. And if you look at leadership today in Africa, I think it's a question which we shouldn't pretend about. If you look at leadership today in Africa, we are not getting it right in many areas, and it's fundamental. But the game has taught us that we can get to where we want to be, because when it comes to football, if all the elements are fair, Africa has a chance.
Let's give Dr. Camila a question and also a question on legacy in South Africa.
Here, I just want to reflect, and I think just to link back to what I said, why it's important to conduct research, measure, evaluate, because you can then assess what you've achieved, and I think, and also learn from your lessons. So one of the things that I can say about South Africa, I've been fortunate enough to conduct research in 2014 in Brazil, and with students, all with students, building that local capacity, and then also in terms of after South Africa, Euro 2016, we did research with some of my students who went and to understand and assess, what the fans at Euro's perceptions were in relation to 2010, and in terms of nation branding, and it was all still very positive. But I think we also need to learn from the question was what lessons are we taking forward to the next bid? And I can reflect on my own experiences from actually having worked on the failed 2004 Olympic Games, and then going from there and in terms of 2010. So what we don't do well enough is to take those lessons forward, and that's why I spoke about knowledge transfer. And it mustn't sit with us as individuals it's institutional knowledge that needs to be transferred, and it needs to be shared. And why I also made the point about the collaboration, we can't work in isolation. We can't have our commercial partners on the one side, federations on another side, and academia. And sometimes academia is not even part of the conversation, okay? And that's the point. It's about the collaborations. And I push that agenda because it's important that we as academics need to be practical, need to be applied to make a difference to society, to make a difference to industry, and our federations, to strengthen our federations. But at the same time, we need to all buy into that concept of collaboration. So I'm putting it out there to the industry. We're here to support. We're here to make our contribution together.
I mean, you asked a question of legacy and the 2010 World Cup. And legacy can be many things. I happen to be personally a legacy of the 2010 World Cup. Without the World Cup in South Africa, I don't think I'll ever be at FIFA. I worked for FIFA in 2010 World Cup. If you go to my country today, they built 10 stadiums for the World Cup. Beautiful stadiums. Roads, infrastructure. That's why I reject this whole thing that people sometimes think that Africa must be taught modernity and so on. Because we've been able to keep this. If you go to my country today, all the 10 stadiums are still operational. Not one white elephant. If you talk about skills base and skills transfer, there are Africans like myself who are working at global stage because of the World Cup. Now, of course, it didn't do enough, that it could have galvanized Africa, but sometimes the first time is a difficult time. It's trial and error. We talk about leadership. Everyone talks about leadership. I told you, my weakness is that I'm an entrepreneur. I really don't think about things usually from a very conceptual point of view. I always ask, what do you want to do? What are you doing now to get to where you want to be? Our league in South Africa pays as much as the league in Belgium, in Denmark, a lower league in the top 5 teams. The players can go and earn $50,000, $40,000, and so on. Why? It's because they have rejected the idea of permanent aid. They have rejected the idea that somebody else must. Of course, we are all for globalization and building partnerships, which is exactly the culture we're bringing at CAF. The culture we're bringing at CAF is not, as I say, I mean, fortunately, none of us want to make a living from football. We want, and we see football as an opportunity to rebrand our continent. Nobody can walk in now. South Africa wants to host the Women's World Cup, I'm told. But no one asks a question, can these South Africans, these Africans do it? You know? Isn't that legacy? It's a mindset. It's erasing the single story. And I hope it does that for your people as well. Because for us, from a confidence levels, that's what it has done. Thank you.
One more. We have 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Short question and short answers.
I will try and be as brief as possible. I would like to ask the panel, from the beginning of the conversation, there was a talk about African progression, which is a beautiful story. We talked about the single story and the need to change the narrative, which is also a beautiful story. We talked about knowledge sharing, which is a great initiative, and others. And I believe that charity begins at home. And having said that, my question is that, just before my question, the panel holds a very important positions in their organizations, and from where I'm standing, that's leadership right there, because with those positions come with great responsibility. So my question is, what initiatives have the panel or the organization that the offices that the panel holds, have they initiated to promote access for those African communities, for the African clubs to be able to be exposed to the opportunities, to be able to be exposed to the knowledge that's there. What examples of initiatives are in place to promote that access? Because access is also another element that is lacking from where I have observed. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It's very important. Actually, I was thinking about the same as I started and said that this event is very important for the African future generally, not only for the football. But I don't want this event to end up with some recommendations. These recommendations will be set in the drawers without any actions. So regardless of our initiatives or our positions and how can we support, I believe that as soon as we started here, we need this event to end up with recommendations and action plans. Okay? And I will start by myself. I would recommend to have some initiatives based on this event and start transferring it to the authorities, which I can do in Egypt or in Africa or whatever, and start together setting up a plan and action plan clearly towards a target, not just statements and events like this. So the first thing we need to do, Dr. Kamelia, with the honor of having Hamad bin Khalifa University hosting this event, we will ask you to push such kind of events further with an action plan, and I will be your responsibility. And I will ask you guys to support the idea of having an action plan and continue a series of events, and next time we can even have the official representatives of the African countries and African federations to be participants in order to put this into the role of action.
Thank
I
you.
think just my last point, I really have to apologize. I have a board meeting which started at 12 o'clock, which I was supposed to, I thought we would finish at 11:30. I need to make one point. You spoke about access. I think access starts with symbols, right? Because symbols make you believe that you can do something. If you go to CAF today, the CAF of today, the average age of directors, I'm in my 30s. The director of competition is from Dr. Obi's country, is 36, 37. The director of HR and the services is from Egypt, she's 41. Director of finance is from Ghana, she's 42. The director of legal is from Kenya, is 37. CAF is probably the only place in Africa that has got a youthful leadership. The director of member association is from DR Congo, and she is 38. Now we've got other, I think, maybe 3 directors who are over the age of 50. The young people, Africa has got a youthful population. CAF's leadership has transformed to be a young leadership. I'm from a village, in no water, no electricity where I come from. When I was born, now it's fine. But we have to inspire people in our continent, the younger people from an academic point of view. This is my parting shot. We have to think not only about solutions, but about practical solutions, about practical things. If you want to work in football, if you send a CV to CAF, say, or a proposal, I want to do 1, 2, 3 to change the face of my continent. This is the window of African football. The title of this discussion was, What About Africa? I was thinking about it. And when we were starting late, I was getting a little bit upset because they would say the Africans are always starting late. What about Africa? We must change the way we think first about ourselves and feel about ourselves. What others think about us, it's okay. If we change the younger generation, become entrepreneurs, you are a volunteer here. In 2030, the next World Cup, you must sit where I'm sitting. But how does it happen? So I really want to thank you for this opportunity. I hope we have more engagements like this. African football is not 90 minutes. African football and the new face of African football is not just about slogans. maybe we will not succeed. Maybe we won't get to the promised land where we need to get. But we will lay the foundation for those who come after us. That here was once an opportunity whereby there were Africans who never took a cent from this thing, but invested and wanted to leave a legacy whereby the Africans will be the masters of their own destiny, commercially free, to have a voice. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we won't take any more questions.
Sorry, maybe after we finish the panel, maybe you can chat together for more questions. Because we need to start our second panel now. First, we want to thank our speakers and our moderator, Dr. Gerard Akindas, Dr. Camila Swart, Councillor Hossein Abu Laila, Mr. Lakolo September, Dr. Mitchell Obi. Thank you for being here. We are much honored. Thank you so much. Now I would like to, Dr. Camila will be the moderator for our next panel. We will talk about two of the aspiring projects, AI projects in football, and we're talking about the future now. So our first presentation will be about SADA Insights. We would like to welcome Dr. James Shee from College of Science and Engineering, HBKU. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start our next panel. So, can you please remain seated? Okay, so for our next panel, it will be about aspiring projects and AI reshaping the future of football. Our moderator will be Dr. Camila Swart. And for our first project, Dr. James Shee from College of Science and Engineering, HBKU. We would also like to invite Mr. Adel Saad. He is the founder and CEO of Scoratech. And also Dr. Jens Schneider from HBKU. Okay, you will start.
Thank you, Nada. Welcome everybody to our second panel. We changing tact a little bit, and we're looking towards the future and how we can use artificial intelligence to enhance football industry. My colleagues at the back, could you join us, please? We're starting the next panel. Thank you. So we have two very exciting projects to share with you, and how these projects can help us enhance the football industry in Africa in particular, but it also has broader applications. So I'm going to just very briefly introduce my colleagues on stage here. Dr. James Shee is an associate professor at the College of Science and Engineering at Hamad bin Khalifa University, and his research areas include AI and multimedia technologies for sport, art and culture. And he will be sharing the SADA project with you today. He's the scientific lead on this project, which is a joint project that involves several universities and media industries to analyze social media data for mega sports events like the FIFA World Cup. And of course, as I said, it has applications for other events going forward. We also have with us today Adel Saad, who's Scorer's founder and CEO. He's a top-level collegiate athlete who forwent a professional soccer career for a life working with data sets, and is now making a contribution in another way. He's combined all these years of experience as a data analyst, a top-level athlete, and his graduate education to get a license as a FIFA agent, and then launched Quarter Stars, an innovative sports agency that uses quantitative analysis and data mining for football talent, And in 2010, SCORA was founded with the mission to support 300 million aspiring footballers on the journey. And he's going to share more about how they are helping aspiring soccer players. And then finally, jointly with Ideal, we have on the SCORA project is Dr. Jens Snyder, who is also assistant professor at the College of Science and Engineering, also at HBKU, and his research has recently focused on computer vision tasks, leveraging AI-based technologies for feature extraction in large data and the visualization. And as I mentioned, he is collaborating with Ideal and has been awarded a National Research Priority Project by Qatar National Research Foundation, and is the lead principal investigator for this project, be a star career path recommendations for soccer. So they will be sharing the second presentation. So just very briefly, before James does the presentation on SADA, to say when we were talking about legacy, this project in fact is a legacy from the 2010 FIFA World Cup. So it's one of the research projects that I was involved in, looking at how South Africa and South Africa's World Cup was covered in the media in key tourism markets for South Africa. And we were analyzing how the media has changed in these key markets. And we were tracking online coverage pre-lead up, during, and post the World Cup in South Africa. And with James and I being colleagues, we then came together and said, okay, how can we take this project forward? And this is what he will be sharing with you today. And as I mentioned, it can also be applied for other events. So over to you, James.
Hello, everyone. Camilla, thanks for bringing me here, and thanks for Nada. Maybe I will just walk over to the laptop here to share our project here. So the name of this project we call SADA Insight. So actually SADA is Arabic words means echo. The idea is we want to make use of the emerging technology today to help us to understand or even manage mega sport events like FIFA in a really ultra-fast manner. Okay, so that's the concept behind. The reason we want to do this because we see a lot of emerging technology like AI or big data technology, but it is actually a big hurdle for a lot of people in not just to say in the sport community, I think in many communities, for them to utilize this kind of emerging technology is actually a high barrier for them. So that's the motivation behind we want to bring the AI technology, the data technology, much more accessible, such that for all the organizer, stakeholder for a sport event can be more easier. So we take the FIFA World Cup this year in Qatar as testing cases for our project. So we know that I think I don't need to repeat, we know that there's a lot of possibility and perception changes that can happen by hosting the World Cup in a country, right? But in reality, it is actually what happened. So this is actually what we want to use AI technology and data technology to understand, for example, like Twitter, one of the major social media that most of the tourists or the audience coming to Qatar, they could be the fans already in here, or they could be the fans actually of Qatar. How do they look at it? And we want to analyze data to give us an reality or even some prediction. And the whole idea is, with this reality check, for the stakeholder of the mega event like FIFA, can we do something before things getting to the deviation? So that's actually what we want to understand the original motivation, and we want to use that as a benchmark. And the reason we choose Twitter, it's just one of the platform we see is really suitable for us to understand the perception from people outside. All right, and of course the same system, the same methodology that we are using can be applicable to any online platform or any social media platform that is suitable to the hosting country or the organizer of the sport event. And as of today, so far we have already collected 4.2 million tweets, which is highly relevant to the FIFA event. And I'm going to show you how we collect those tweets. So far, every day, we are collecting the tweet from online. And I'm going to show you a graph. It is actually, we predicted that when the opening ceremony coming, and it will have a surge of the tweaking. And we need to have the system that in place can manage that huge amount of data, all right? And we find that something very funny. The trend is actually quite repeatable when we look at those previous events, so that we are able to prepare the infrastructure that can handle that much of amount of data. And this is very critical information because we want to have the understanding about the sentiment, the perception. And if the infrastructure is not ready to react, to collect and analyze that much of data, it won't happen. So that's the reason we want to give everyone an idea, like how is all the tweet amount so far. And we believe that with this project, we are going to collect the biggest tweet amount so far among all the previous project. And one of our motivation, we are going to make all this data set to be openly accessible, so that for everyone, they are interested working or analyzing related research or business or opportunity or analysis, they can access this data. And so far as all the data we find that 30% of the tweet, at least 30% of the tweet, they involve the emoji. So ask yourself when you send a message, right? When you send a message, you're likely to involve the emoji. But a lot of analytical technology so far, they didn't consider the emoji well, so that the sentiment or the perception sometimes can be taken wrongly. I'm going to give some really interesting, or I would say funny situation to all of you. So the other thing we want to conclude, we so far, we see a lot of good comments or bad comments to the FIFA events in Qatar here. So far, based on the data, we find that the overall average of the sentiment is always positive as of today, from even the overall perception from among the whole Twitter space. And this one, number 4, I don't need to, I think it's very intuitive, but we want to show that even the data can support that. So far, the highest sentiment football player is Messi, right? Of course, we see something changing when the game happened between Saudi and Argentina. We do see it drop, and then after the other game with Mexico, it's come back again. So maybe I jump to the, give all of you the data that so far we have collected. So we start from April 1st, and then we keep on collecting as of today. And our goal is to, even after 3 months of the FIFA, we will still collect the data, so that we can give a good spectrum of the whole pre-event, lead-up, and hosting, and the post-World Cup. And this data, we believe that will give a really good insight for any stakeholder, or in the future, if there will be a FIFA to happen in Egypt, in Africa, we believe that that can give a good preparation for the technology infrastructure or organizer. And within the system, you can pretty much see what we see every day. We basically will see a statistic summary we can see how many tweets we have already collected and analyzed it, right? And then the average sentiment will become a real time, we can see it. And so far, how many emoji? So you can see this is what I captured this morning. Actually, the percentage of the tweet that involve emoji is already approaching to 39%. So that means it's quite a bit of amount of the tweet involve the emoji. So this is actually some screenshot. We can use the system to even inspect individual tweet, right? I remember when we start this project, Camilla and me and also other colleagues, it's really addictive. We try to look at what's happening, why it bring up the sentiment, what bring down the sentiment, right? So we see how people actually talking different aspect about the fever. And the system is also will give you a daily alert. So every day we will receive, so this is some example that I capture here. So for example, on the date of November 9, we start to see the trend is ramping up. So we used to just collect the tweet less than 10,000. But starting from November 9, we start to see the tweet is actually ramping up. So, and then we will also see the daily alert according to different topic that we want to monitor within all the collected tweet. So this is actually what I want to show you. So since April 1st, we see a really stable amount of the data being collected. But when it's about November 8, November 9, we see the amount of tweet is actually ramping up crazy, right? And then, of course, when it's approaching the November 20, the first day of the match, it's the peak time, and then the second, the third day, and then now it's going down to the level, but still staying at a high level. We believe that based on the previous research work we see from previous World Cup event, the next peak should be coming during the round 16, so which is actually predictable, right? And this is the sentiment changes so far. So as I said, so far we see the overall average is above 0, except on around April 21st. And for the rest of the time, it's actually staying at a positive. So this is what we see, the sentiment over time, based on all the tweet amount. And these are the keywords we use to select the tweet to be collected. We don't collect all the random tweets. All the tweet must has at least one of the keywords here. So for example, like Football World Cup 2022, Qatar 2022, FIFA World Cup. So you see those keywords with the purple color. Those are the keywords, are the official keyword that being used by the FIFA or Supreme Committee. And then we show the amount of the tweet that is related to the keywords. And of course, we expected that those official keywords will actually generate the highest amount of the tweet. But we also see that some other keywords, which are the keyword that actually created by the fans or created by the Twitter user. So the World Cup 2022, we find that it actually can be comparable to the official keywords. But the reason why we want to say this, we want to show this because in order to make the analysis fast, you don't really need to bother all the tweet, right? We actually have a paper, actually we already report, by analyzing the first the purple color, or even including the third highest observed keyword by the user, is already able to give you close to 90% of the accuracy for the sentiment, comparing that you need to deal with all the keywords, all right? And so this is the sentiment of individual keyword that we also analyzed it. Now, I keep on mentioning about like more than 30% of the tweet actually involve the emoji. So this is actually what we find. Of course, I think it's very normal. You expect the emoji, the icon with the football, become the highest one, right? And you see these are the top 12 emoji that being used in all these tweets, all right? Of course, there's still some other emoji. But we noticed that when we do the analysis, maybe ask yourself, like when you look at a tweet with a fire emoji, do you think it's a positive sentiment or negative sentiment? In the context of the FIFA, of course, it's positive, right? But we find that a lot of existing technology, when they analyze the tweet, they will turn it into a negative. So this is actually the novelty of the project, that we find that we need, subject to different culture and the events, the technology that analyzes sentiment need to be dynamic and gauge to the context and also towards to the culture. So in here, based on this, the system will automatically identify this is actually a football event, right? Because from the data, it shows us this is highly relevant to the football. So the system will automatically calibrate the emoji sentiment value that is suitable to the context, such that to give a really high accurate estimation of the sentiment. Because without this kind of smart calibration, you won't able to get a correct sentiment in order to conclude those graphs that we generate before. So I'm going to show you another graph about the football teams. This is as of yesterday. So maybe I keep on asking Camilla, how come there's some changings, right, of the tweet? But let's look at the amount of the tweet. We see that among all the tweet related to England and USA are the dominating tweets. And then Wales, Australia, Ghana, these are the tweet later on, they ramp up a lot. So by knowing the amount of the tweet, that also give us some idea how the sentiment that happened, right? When you look at the sentiment, we found that as of yesterday, the top two sentiment of the football team are Tunisia and Saudi Arabia. So I think you guys know better than me. Some of them I'm trying to understand why. But there's also the beauty of the system that also make us to understand something a bit surprising. I have been attending the game in the stadium, I think quite often, almost every 2 days or every day. I was in the game for the Iran. It's a great news, right? But for some of you to understand what's going on in their country, or for some of you actually look into the details, the system will able to give you an idea about the sentiment, what's going on about the country, such that you can have an early alert. How should you deal with some media reportings? And then after the team, we of course, everyone want to predict the future, right? Everyone want to predict who's the golden boots or golden glove for this year FIFA. And one of the ambitious initiative in our project, we want to see, can AI and the data predict who's the golden boots and golden glove before the official announcement? In our opinion, which is actually possible, because all this recognition are based on the on-field performance. When there's some good performance, bad performance happen, the user will basically tweet a lot, and that actually gives us a choice who will be the potential candidate for the golden boots and golden gloves. And as you can see here, when you look at the sentiment, I think no-brainer. I think everyone may easily spot out Messi, right? But we do see some new players that get a really good sentiment. But the reason why we also want to compare with the Twitter amounts, because you want to have significant votes, significant support of the people that voice out what they think, right? So far we see that the top 5, I would say in terms of the tweet frequency, like that has the biggest amount of the tweet would be Messi, Ronaldo, which is actually I think most of the people expected, even Pepe, right? Neymar, still, right? And we do see there's some new players that actually getting the traction. So that's actually what we're trying to do. This is the snapshot as of yesterday. We are trying to see how this tweet amount and the send amount keep changing. And by correlating the tweet amount and also the changes of the sentiment, we want to see whether it's possible to predict the golden boots and golden gloves. So now I want to be a bit specific for some of the concepts that we want to know that might be useful for the organizer or the people who coordinate for the a sport event like FIFA. So I guess many of you may have been participating in the opening ceremony or maybe have seen the opening ceremony for those who are here, right? I personally was there in the stadium, and comparing to my experience back to the last World Cup, I personally feel really impressed, honestly. But funny enough, when we look at the change of the sentiment, before the match, the first match, or the opening event, the sentiment is actually higher. So after the opening, the sentiment is actually dropped. So this is actually to somewhat surprise technically, but somewhat not to my surprise when I look into the tweet. We see that a lot of the tweets is actually coming from people not participating in the event or not even in Qatar. So we see that there's a media bias, which is actually commenting, criticizing the opening. So this is what actually flagged from the system that we can see. And we also try to look at the sentiment changes of Messi, right? So this is actually what we are doing every day, like a stock price. And also the keyword of Saudi, we see the changes when they win the game and when they lost the game. So this is actually what we have been doing, trying to understand the changes. And the Germany, right? So now, so those concepts we just mentioned is based on a particular keywords. So there are some concept or topic that actually will involve a collective keywords. That actually I'm working with Camilla and our group of collaborators. We want to identify a collection of the keywords that can help us to understand, for example, the event capability. See whether that can align to the motivation of the hosting country, right? So far, this is what we try to analyze in terms of the capability, legacy, transport, accommodation, stadium, and the sustainability, right? And in terms of the tweet amount, that's what we see. I think everyone comment a lot about the stadium, the capability in terms of sentiment. I think that really achieved the goal, that changed the perception. I think not just us experience this. Of course, no one is perfect. But I personally, when comparing to my previous experience attending the World Cup in person, now I have a ground truth to compare the data. I think the capability really makes sense. But one thing I saw a lot of information, even when I have discussion with Camilla about the sustainability, because this is one of the major goal we as Qatar trying to host the event. We want to support sustainable operations, right? But so far the sentiment seems like not really recognizing that. So now we are kind of not even the midway to the event. Can we do something, right? Can we are here, we see a lot of effort have been put in terms of sustainability. So before the end of the event, can we do something? So this is actually one of the examples we want to indicate from the data, the perception online, the perception from a lot of people outside, seems like they don't agree with that. And then this is about the event experience. In terms of the atmosphere, I think everyone like it, right? In terms of tweet amount and the sentiment, they all have a good amount to support the evidence. I think quite a bit of people enjoying it, right? Even this is the perception on the Twitter space. In terms of the fans and the cause, relatively still positive, but relatively lower than the atmosphere. So is there any correlation between the atmosphere and the fans' experience and the cause? I think this I will leave to the experts or the people who organize this to interpret it. So something about the destination image, right? Let's say in the future, we want to learn the lesson. We want to borrow the experience from Qatar for other hosting country, right? So here we analyze from the perspective of the coastline, beautiful, welcoming, food, dining, all kind of aspect. So you see quite many of the aspect we try to measure is actually getting quite positive. So all these are the evidence that we draw from the data. So I don't know whether align to each of your experience individually here, right? But for myself, I actually I can see many of them is actually quite aligned by being the in-person experience. So now coming to the end, I just want to conclude. So the idea of Sutter Insight project is actually trying to make it more accessible for everyone to access AI technology and data technology. And our goal is by the end of the World Cup, we would like to share the data. Second, for the daily alert, so far right now, we are just choosing the keywords for the system to analyze everyday sentiment, right? And we are building an initiative right now, trying to have a channels that can connect to social media again. We want to collect the keywords that is actually, maybe we overlook some keyword, maybe we overlook some aspect, maybe we overlook some concept. We want to have the user actually contributing the keywords so that we can use the system to understand, to learn the sentiment based on the user perception, right? And again, we are trying to move, as I mentioned, more than 30% of the tweet actually involve emoji or even some complicated image or sentence, right? So our plan for the novelty we're going to push forward is, I just mentioned that we are going to open this system so that to allow people actually can subscribe this daily sentiment alert. Second, we are going to advance the system to deal with some sarcastic tweet. Since we are already able to understand the emoji, right? And even some tweet involve very complex sentence, which is actually the opposite when they tweet about a comment, right? And some of them will involve some image that may not be highly relevant. So these are actually the next plan we are going to do. And we're going to extend the system to other language. So far, all the tweet we collected so far is based on English. And what we are going to do is we're going to extend the system to other languages so that the technology and the platform will able to be supporting different regions in the world for hosting the mega event like FIFA. So that's pretty much what I want to share with all you all, and I welcome for the questions.
Thank you, James. Before the questions, we're going to ask Adil and Jens for their presentation, and then we'll take questions in relation to both presentations. So, Adil, over to you.
Thank you. So before we start, I was just going to ask, just to get a view of hands, how many of you at one point aspired to be a professional footballer, wanted to play the game? Okay, it's good. Myself. So in your quest, you obviously had questions, right? At this age of 17, 18, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I get there? And
in the end, a big result comes to, hey, we need to talk to, this industry is controlled by agents, okay? I need to find an agent who has a connection who can push me through. So with that discovery, we realized that this being the world's largest and the beautiful game of soccer, the biggest game, you have 300 million aspiring footballers across the globe that are looking for this advice or looking for this agent. And agents don't have the time to answer in details all your questions as an aspiring footballer. And this is what we're going to go through. And this is what Skora and the University of Hamad bin Khalifa University have teamed up together to address and answer. I'll take you through this journey. So what we're talking about is, yes, a 300 million player problem. 99% of aspiring players are ignored by human agents. And so we're talking about millions of players and billions of dollars of potential being wasted by 3 key challenges. So what the players resort to is, once they get your contact and they realize that you're listed on the intermediary sites, they reach out through WhatsApp messages, which amount to really nothing. You know, and I get hundreds of those daily. Please help me, and so forth. Now, on the other side, if they actually do get the attention of an agent, or an agent wants to make a living on them, he ends up charging them a lot of money, sometimes up to $4,000, and very little outcome comes out of that. And the final thing that we discovered along this journey is that the players, they have CVs and regular jobs, but as they aspire to go professional, they don't realize that they need a special CV as well, or a football CV. Where did they play? What did they do? What videos they have? So this is a brief example that this methodology works all the way from the east to the west. Kalim Allah was a player from Pakistan that we were able to move to the United States, the first to come on and play in U.S. soil. Omar Gabber is a player that's from Egypt and came to LAFC as well for a brief stint. And we moved him and we brought him back to Pyramids. And he's now back with his home team, Zamalek. And Salih Muhammad was a player, a homegrown player from the Bay Area that wanted to play and couldn't figure out the methodology. So what we basically did here is, depending on what background, what position, what academy you come from, we figured out a way where you can communicate with your own mobile and personal AI agent. So basically we combine your athletic data and turn it into a marketable CV and give you your best pathway or opportunity, if one exists, to take and move forward. What we did was we ended up collecting and figuring out how to get the past historical data of over 10 years of professional players. Getting the history really helps you move and know what the future could look like. And the best thing that we did afterward was team up with Hamad bin Khalifa University to do the actual analytics and take the data and put it into the machine learning and for AI. This is where kind of I will hand over to Jens to kind of describe what the next steps we took.
All right, thank you very much. So from the technical side, as you can imagine, this is extremely challenging. So you have all your data with, in the worst case, if it works, 300 million data points. and the data can be noisy, the data can be incomplete. So what do we do with all that data? Well, there's two aspects here. One is a computer vision aspect, where we say with minimal infrastructure, we ask people to have their friends record their standardized fitness tests on a cell phone, and then we try to use computer vision to turn that into concrete numbers. How high can somebody jump? How fast can somebody run? Give the player an agility score, and then move that score back to the CV. And we are aware that with the limitations of a mobile phone, these scores aren't necessarily accurate. So the next step then is that players can choose to submit this to a cloud server where we have more computational power and we can analyze in more depth. But of course that regrettably comes with a cost because this compute isn't free. And after that, kind of the highest level of certification is to play in front of an actual coach who certifies these measurements. And then you have the score for you. And the difference of going directly to the coach and doing that is that you can benchmark yourself. So you might be the best soccer player in your town, but you don't know the other towns necessarily. So, and if you compare on a regional and on a global scale, then you can take these numbers, and we can also give you recommendations on where you need to improve to make the cut. That is one aspect of it. The other one is in this project that we got funded by the Qatar National Priorities, Qatar National Research Fund for the priorities research, is that we want to have a recommender system. And the recommender system looks at existing transfer market moves and identifies a career path trajectory, and then finds career path trajectories that closest match your background. And this background consists of your fitness, consists of whether you're left or right-footed, what your preferred position on the field is to play, can also consist of the region you're from and what trajectory other players in similar stats have taken. Now, where these digital systems have the highest impact is where the coverage per stadium is very low. So where you have large rural areas or where you have to actually travel to go to proper training facilities. And that is why, in particular, here we focus on the use of ubiquitous hardware. So the assumption is that you or your friend might have a cell phone on which then the system can run. And of course, from the research perspective, this is where I come in. There's enough challenges to make that a interesting research topic. But at the same time, we see massive impact for aspiring players, especially for countries that are still developing their football infrastructure.
So basically in Africa, you have players that don't get opportunities to even field themselves. They don't get the chance to even go to the trial. They don't get an opportunity to show themselves. Now we can actually take their data, and if they have significant scoring in certain markers, we can reach to them. So you can reach to them and invite them to showcases. And this is one of the things that Scora did here in Qatar is we gathered, we test piloted this out to many players. The majority of our players came from the African region. They worked security jobs. They worked in Talabat. They worked many different jobs, but they had come with the purpose of, look, Qatar has a World Cup. This is my dream. I'll take any job. Let me see if I can pursue it. And they came here to discover that, look, Qatar has a system where they only have 3 foreign players on their on the top team, and they didn't even have that knowledge, right? And they can sign any 3 professional players they want in the world. So Scora aims to not only guide, it aims to guide and be that information center where any player that's aspiring stops by, comes to score, sees how he measures up before he takes that chance. But so what we did was, we did a test pilot, we loaded their data, we took the top players, the 18 best players out of 1,300 players, and put together a team in the third division. Third division here in Qatar was more flexible to carry foreign players, and the results was outstanding. The team, Lusail, had 8th place on the year before. Once we teamed up with Lusail and put this team together, we took the QAL, first place for the entire team. 2 of those players ended up moving on to the 2nd division, and now we're looking to deploy this out with our partners in Ghana. We have a partnership in Egypt, and we're looking to extend this throughout the globe. Application-wise, we believe that players have a lot of questions how they can pursue their career, but they don't have the answer. The answers aren't there, and SCORE is meant to be that guidance system and offer them multiple opportunities before they sell their father's last piece of land, before they sell grandma's last gold, which is very common in this industry. This happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adil and Jens. So now we'll open for a round of questions. If I can please ask you to introduce yourselves and keep your questions very brief so that we can get through a few more this time. Thank you.
World Cup and also a scholar, and I write on football players and a semi-professional player from Ghana. So I'm talking from experience and based on research that I've also done. You talk about using various variables, you talk about acceleration and stuff. As coaches, I'm also a licensed coach. Did you collect those variables from coaches, or based on your own intuition that you think that these are things coaches look for when they are selecting players for their club? That's first question. And I would like to also find out some of the challenges these players also have that inform your concept, or that is driving your concept. That's my second question. Thank you.
So I'll answer the first question. So yes, we take into impact, the algorithm does even look at the coach's mentality. So if, for example, a coach even had an issue with a Nigerian player on a previous team, we actually compute that to see that it might not be the best opportunity to put him in front of that coach, because that coach might already have a tainted view of the player. So that's one thing that we're implementing on. The variables, we know the transfer market's always changing, as you know. So the history of players doing well, you know, where players move to a certain location and they do well by, if they stay, say, more than 90 minutes games, and a game is 90 minutes, if a player's only being fielded 17 minutes out of 20 games, he's only played 6 or 7 games out of that season, they haven't really done well. If their contract isn't re-signed in this area, there could be multiple reasons why a player doesn't continue and this demographic. So in our application, the very first thing that we show you is very similar players to you, to your style. Obviously, we are developing to see what academy you came from. We ask, did you come, is this from street play, right? So then you would need more organization. There's a lot of variables, but there's 3 main things that we focus on: the physical, the tactical, and then the psychological. We're still trying to figure out the mental, how we can figure out where a champion player is, or a professional football player. There's a certain mentality, as you know, that it takes a lot of sacrifice. Sometimes players don't make it mentally. They can make it physically, they can make it tactically, but mentally they don't have the grit. Your second question? if you. Oh, if we involve the coaches, yes. So look, right now we're at a top funnel. What I mean by a top funnel is we see that there's certain metrics that the footballer needs to run. We know a footballer runs 14 kilometers in a match, right? So if he's playing on a street level and everybody's telling he's the best one on his street, as Jens referred, and they're telling him he can play professional, you can play professional, the discovery going to the 2 or 3 streets down the road and is sometimes eye-opening for a 17-year-old enter that, whoa, there's higher levels. And then the physical prepness, right? Some players, they have the will, they have the childhood memory that they're a professional player, that they're the best one, but then, and they're ready, they finally saved up the money, but they didn't even get to the physical prepness as a professional footballer needs to get to before you go and you do that trial. So this is we know the metrics of second division, third division, even fourth division in some European teams are more important to us than looking at the premier level right now. I'm not going to go and take an aspiring footballer right off the bat and guide him to the metrics of De Bruyne or Mohamed Salah and or Ronaldo, who has 15, many years of experience. We're going to guide him to those entry clubs and barriers.
It's like I'm not convinced with that in the sense that each coach has what he looks at for in a particular player, right? The qualities may be different and it varies with each coach. So I was looking at for maybe a standard or a common platform that inform your decision or your concept so that you know that most of the coaches focus on the physical aspect, focus on the mental aspect, focus on the psychological aspect, so that it gives kind of a balance for you to have a platform for coaches, so that coaches' input is also, fed into whatever you are doing.
I can very briefly answer that. So when dealing with AI, a common question that I receive is, will it make my job obsolete? And I tell people then, it will make the part of your job obsolete that you didn't like to do anyway. So as a coach normally, or as a football scout, you have to go through so many different players, make a decision which one is the right one for us. But this year can give you a ranking, can give you a pre-screen. And instead of looking at 100 players, you might look at the top 20 or top 30 players that the system recommends to you, and then you make your decision based on the secondary preferences. But you are then assured that they at least have the minimum fitness and agility qualifications. And of course, we also talk to coaches to understand what it is they look at, but we don't see this here as we give you one recommendation and take it or leave
it, but we give you a ranking of players that are looking for a job, and you know the positions that you have in your team, and then you go and you look at these players. Answers your question?
We need to, thank you. I think it did, but we can take that conversation to afterwards. We need to move to the next question at the back. Thank you.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. My name is Farinaz Hossein Ali. I'm from London, but my heritage is from Mauritius, so I'm very passionate about giving back to the continent using sports and football. I just wanted to say as well, thank you. It's been a great event, so hats off to the organisers. So my question is, in regards to your platform, it's amazing, and obviously it's targeted to the player, but is there something where, or consideration where we can actually help support the academies on ground in Africa? Because you've got like the likes of Pogba, Mane, Salah that have gone beyond and done amazing, but there's no like filter going back to their academies, like any recognition, any funding, like that sort of infrastructure for the academies to be able to help the grassroots players, but as well as help the academies as well. Because the problem is everyone forgets about the academy and focus on Manchester United and Arsenal and Liverpool, But what about the original academies who invested their time and effort into our African players from the beginning? And that's my question. Thank you.
So the academies is our deploying ground, where we deploy, because again, when you're 16, 17, 18, and you have this question, you're most likely in an academy. So when we started here in Qatar, we started with the Lusail Football Academy as well. So I hope that answers the question. But of course, academies they run and with the hopes that one of their players is going to be adopted. And there's going to be training compensation that comes back to this academy. More youth and talented youth will want to enroll in that academy when one of their academies goes to the big leagues or makes it big, those players. And so academies is where it's at. Of course, our first partnership was with Ghana, an academy in Ghana. And that went really well. We ran a tournament there. In the end, like it creates a ranking system and makes it easy on the eye of the coach, and it makes players also not put themselves at risk. But it also, like Dr. Yen said, it makes it easier for the coaches to look at the kids that are ready, and again, there is that I element. We're not going to be eliminating every single coach and say as winner, but at least it's an optimization. If you want to think of defragging your hard drive and optimizing it, it's we're hoping to do an optimization in the world of football with aspiring footballers.
There's a question at the back. I'm going to take one question. You still have your question? 1, 2, and then the final question, and then we need to close the session. Thank you.
My name is Omar Rashid. I've been in coaching for the last 32 years. And my very first soccer ball was a bunch of socks and underwears that we put together 40 some years ago, maybe a little more. These are the forgotten players, the ones that don't get seen in Africa or third world countries that don't even have a ball to play in. And they're so lost. And they gotta get lucky somehow. Someone sees them, whether it's on TV or whatever. And they're the ones that are so passionate about soccer. How do you reach those players? And for the tweet part, there's been a lot of unfair negative comments about Qatar and the World Cup and all that stuff. How do you handle that part? Thank you.
Yes, maybe for the first part, yes, that is a very tough challenge. The assumption that we have is that you at least have access to a mobile phone and that you have some space to play. But we don't require that you go to a stadium or that you have any additional gear. And that is what makes it so challenging to do the first assessment, because we are very aware of this and we scale down the amount of technology that we require aspiring players to have. And of course, there can be tiers. You can then be recommended, drive out to this club. They have a free training, participate there to get a better evaluation. But at first, it's really about pre-screening at scale and putting aspiring players, giving them the right perspective about their skill set.
Okay, regarding to the second part, the tweet, I think that's the reason we want to have a system that can give you a really quick, early idea about the perception, the audience, or the people outside towards certain topic. I take the opening ceremony as an example again, right? I personally there, and then the system already start to react. We see people like it, but more people, they don't like it. And without the current platform, right, most of the time we can only rely on the traditional media, right? And next day I see There are some media, in some country, they make a really big bad comments on the opening ceremony. But when you look into the detail, actually that's not true, right? But most of the time we can only do this after effect if we only rely on the traditional media. But now we have a platform dealing with all the tweet, even before the time the mainstream media will start to report, you already know something is coming. Then I think it's actually a platform to inform the stakeholder. So you know that this is something that you did best, right? So you have a choice, take it easy, or you have a choice, bring your good stuff to share on the other platform. And so eventually I can see the reaction from the people. Oh, they realize that, oh wow, Qatar has actually a really amazing ceremony. And people actually didn't even see it on the screen. So I think this is actually the purpose of the motivation behind we want to have a system making use of the AI technology that can analyze the sentiment really quick, so that to have the stakeholder that can react to it. And of course, the action will be up to the individual organization or the stakeholder, how should they react to it. So, but at least you have the information to react earlier. So that's I hope that answer your part two, yeah.
Hussam Abdullah from Egypt. Gentleman has clarified some of my questions, but I want to ask specifically about collecting the data. How accurate is the data through the apps or the computer comparing with the physical campaigns? And don't you think, as soon as we are talking about Africa now, that Africa and the deep Africa, the villages and the poor areas of Africa does not require real physical campaigns in order to collect appropriate data?
Yes, so that is actually an excellent point. So of course, what we are trying to do doesn't replace a need to build additional infrastructure. It's a mitigation and it's a democratization. So of course, in terms of data accuracy, we are about to start the part on the computer vision. So we hope that, of course, we will work with coaches, with ground truth data and see how accurate we can get. I can't answer this question yet. But also with the constraints of a mobile phone, it will probably be only good to perform the initial ranking, and then players would have to submit their videos that they recorded to a cloud-based system where we have more computational power to give that accuracy boost. And in terms on making it on the player CV, there can be different tiers. So there can be, these scores have only been processed by a mobile phone, these scores have been processed by a cloud, these scores have been verified by a coach. And the more you move, the more valuable your CV will obviously get. But also you have, as a player, the option of seeing, okay, I need apparently to improve in this particular bracket, and then you do that before you approach the coach. That is kind of the idea behind it.
Thank you, Jens. Our final question.
All right. I'm Nathaniel from South Africa, and my question is for the SEDA Insight. I've got two. So the first one is, with the data, you're able to drill it down to be able to have a correlation between keywords and, say, emojis or different keywords or sentiments across different time intervals, and also be able to see how that that visualization has a relation to the traditional media. Are you then able to drill it down to that level? And the second one was, with your data collection, are you able to separate or rather identify the bot and the actual accounting and all those things, those mechanisms in place?
Very good question, actually. I think your first question, this is exactly Camilla and me we are doing.
because I think based on the previous work I think Camilla have been done before about the perception analysis based on the mainstream media. So now we carry on. And what you just mentioned about the correlation, or even the correlation, not just with the time periods, but also with the mainstream media to different keywords, this is exactly what we're trying to do. And this is actually what we are doing now using the FIFA World Cup this time to understand how we should actually do it using the technology that can give the speed. Because the technique for the analysis, we already have it. But the speed and also the complex of the tweet, and I think that leads to your second question. This is exactly the technological breakthrough that we need to deal with about the emoji, the complex of the tweet, and also some of the tweet is actually not valid. Some can be just advertising, people just putting a lot of keyword, but it's totally irrelevant. And some of the tweet is actually whatever you name it, we see it. And how we can actually using AI technology that we can, like instead of a human screening one by one, that would take time, right? So that's actually the motivation of SADA Insight. We want to leverage the speed and the capability of AI so that we can analyze this quickly so that to inform the stakeholder to react to it. So I hope that I answer your question. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Again, thank you to our panelists and for the contributions to football in general, but also with specific applications to Africa. So thank you for joining us today. Of course, the time is limited and we don't have time to answer all the questions, but we'll still be around and you know where to reach us if there are any additional questions. We're going to move to our third panel now, so thank you. This is the end of my journey in terms of the panels, and so before I hand over to the next the final panel, I just wanted to address the question about access, and what I wanted to say is that in terms of my space and my contributions in terms of building capacity, whether I was in South Africa, whether I was in Dubai before this, and now here I am here, I'm always giving back and I'm always looking at the next generation. So just as an example, in this room, we've got Groma, who's just joined the program, a sports journalist from Ethiopia. We have Mariama, heavily involved in football in Ghana, now an alumni, just graduated with her master's, wanting to give back. So as long as all of us in our individual capacities give back, we are building the next generation for them to take over. And so, in fact, in the next session, we are inviting Mariama to come and share the stage as well. Thank you.
We would like to thank Dr. Camila, Dr. James, and Dr. Yan, and Mr. Adil Saad. Now for our last panel, a retrospective view and prospects for future of football. We would like to invite once again Dr. Gerard Akindis from Northwestern University, Qatar, and Mr. Victor, from a senior editor from Peninsula. They will be interviewing a former professional football player, Bill Chato, from Cameroon. So let's welcome them to the stage. We would like to also to invite Mariama to the stage.
Let's start.
our last panel. We have the privilege and the honor to have a very experienced former player from Cameroon, Bill Chateau. I will introduce him, but the session will be bilingual. I'll try to play a role of interpreter. Although I speak French, my memory is not that fast to capture everything someone says to interpret, but I'll do my best. Forgive me if I forget things or misunderstand what has been said. Victor will have questions for Bill, and I interpret a question to Bill. Bill will answer, and then I'll try to convey it to you. That's how we are going to process and bring Mariama also in the discussion. I'll start by a quick introduction of Bill. Bill has an impressive CV of a player, and he also represents what we have in most of African teams today. Born in Africa, raised in France, played in France, and represents Cameroon as a football player. This is a trajectory, common trajectory with most of African national teams today here. Those who are born on the continent are a few less on our teams, but as Osman said earlier, we have no choice, or we have a choice and we choose Africa. It is not a default, it is a decision to represent Africa. And Bill made that decision, and he has a full career, international career, as Cameroonian player, not as French player. But he started his career at professional football, raised and trained in France at Caen, and he played his first professional game in 1991 with the Caen professional team. And from there, his career expanded. He played and won the African Cup of Nations in 2002. He played the final in 2008. He was part of the team that went to the final of the Confederation Cup, which was a short tournament a year before World Cup in 2001. And he also played the World Cup in 2002, the World Cup in Japan, between Japan and Korea. This is very short overview of his CV as a player. He ran Samuel Eto'o, who's one of the top African player ever, and who is currently the president of a Cameroonian federation. He runs his academy in Cameroon. He also worked many years as administrator with the Cameroon Federation and manager of the Lions Indomptables of Cameroon. He has a very extensive CV in football, from being a player, administrator, and now he's preparing his coaching license, the top license for Africa, for CAF, a license A, and he already had a license C and B. Welcome, Bill Chacho. Bill, thank you for being here. I'll now pass the mic to Victor, who will ask you the question, and I'll interpret. Now I'm an interpreter.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks for your patience since we started. For those of you who've been with us since the beginning of this event. Bill, it's been a very impressive CV there. Played in France, played in Germany, and also played in Qatar Sport Club and Alcohol and all that. How has it been? What's the experience like for you as an African player in a foreign land? And could you just give us an overview of how you feel back then as a player?
La question c'est comment, après avoir joué en France, en Allemagne, au Cameroun, au Gabon, au Qatar, quelle fut ton expérience en tant que joueur africain sur tous ces différents pays et tous ces championnats?
Bonjour à tous, merci de m'avoir invité ce soir, je suis très ravi, d'autant plus que c'est au Qatar où est-ce que j'ai aussi joué. Alors c'est vrai que je n'ai jamais joué au Cameroun,
Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. And here, importantly, in Qatar, where I also played for 2 years. I never played in Cameroon.
Je suis parti du Cameroun à l'âge de 8 ans. J'ai suivi mes parents qui étaient diplomates, qui ont travaillé à l'ambassade du Cameroun en France. Et c'est comme ça que, avant, quand mes parents ont quitté le monde diplomatique, ils sont retournés en France. Moi, je suis resté au Cameroun, en France, pour continuer simplement mes études.
Bill didn't play in Cameroon. His parents was diplomats, and they were diplomats based in France. That's how he went to France his early age. And when his parents finished their diplomatic career, he remained in France to finish his studies.
Alors j'ai commencé le football dans un petit club amateur, d'abord. Et par la suite, j'ai eu des clubs qui m'ont repéré. Et ce qui fait que ma carrière a débuté à Caen. Et j'ai parcouru, comme vous l'avez cité tout à l'heure, tous les clubs en France, en Allemagne, au Qatar, au Gabon.
His career started in a small amateur club in France, where he was detected and moved to Caen, and that's where his professional career started. And he played in many different countries and for many different clubs.
Alors tout ça, ça m'a permis de connaître plusieurs facultés à apprendre différentes opportunités de trouver de différentes cultures. Ça m'a appris à avoir différentes cultures de football. La culture française, la culture allemande, la culture qatari. Et tout ça m'a permis de pouvoir grandir dans le football et de comprendre tous les problèmes que le football africain peut avoir aujourd'hui.
And his journey allowed him to understand the diversity of cultures in football, from the German culture of football, French culture, African culture, and that really helped him to be where he is and what he has achieved with Cameroon.
Alors ce n'est pas du tout facile parce que on est footballeur, mais on a aussi une vie de famille. Alors quand on a des enfants, parce que moi aujourd'hui j'ai 3 enfants, aujourd'hui ils sont aussi footballeurs, il y a un qui est déjà professionnel, et ce n'est pas évident de se balader dans tous ces pays et d'apprendre à l'enfant, parce qu'un enfant a besoin de stabilité. Donc au départ j'ai dû faire suivre aussi mes enfants pour qu'ils puissent aussi, pour que je puisse les élever. Mais après, à un moment donné, il a fallu que je fasse un choix et que je puisse, surtout en ma fin de carrière, continuer à aller jouer dans des clubs, mais laisser ma famille, notamment qui sont à Montpellier, pour qu'ils puissent aussi travailler dans les études et puis continuer aussi au football.
It wasn't a very straightforward journey, especially when you have a family. He has 3 children now. The first one of them they are playing football. The first one is professional player right now. It wasn't very easy at the beginning. He moved around with his family, trying to give them the experience and also to stay with them. But towards the end of his career, since kids need stability, they had to study in a very stable environment. He made a decision to leave his family in Montpellier, southern France, and then he could continue getting a different contract in different places while his family was in a more stable environment.
Alors j'ai arrêté le football au Gabon. Pourquoi le Gabon? Parce que je n'avais jamais joué en Afrique, donc j'ai eu cette opportunité-là, ça va pour me permettre aussi de goûter le football africain, de revenir à mes sources, de goûter ce que les joueurs comme Samuel Eto'o, parce que les Samuel Eto'o, ils ont joué en Afrique. Moi, je n'avais jamais eu cette opportunité-là, donc c'était important pour moi de retourner au Gabon. Et j'ai pu connaître le football africain, jouer dans des conditions qui ne sont pas top comme en Europe. Et c'était important pour moi de connaître ça.
He finished his career in Gabon. And why Gabon? Because it was important for him to experience football in Africa. on a daily basis. He played for a national team, but that wasn't enough. Players like Samuel Eto'o had the privilege or the opportunity to start their career at home in Cameroon, then have their career in Europe. He didn't have that opportunity. Then going back to finish his career in Gabon gave him an opportunity to experience football in completely different conditions that were not optimal in terms of infrastructure, support, but he needed that, he wanted that to happen to understand better how African football operates.
Wow, that's a good one. That was a very good one. Bill, you played at a time many regarded as the golden generation of African football in those periods back then. Everywhere you look on the continent, you have outstanding players. In Cameroon, you have Eto'o, you have Roberto Song, and the rest. You come back to Nigeria, these are the days of Kanu Nwankwo, Amokachi, Okocha, and all that. In Zambia, you have Kadusha Buaya and all that. So African footballers were making their mark. They were having huge impact in your playing days. Now, if you look back and compare to what we have today, what could you say? Comparing your playing career back then with the present crop of African players, what can you say about your days, your playing days, and the present generation of players?
Ça va?
Non, vas-y.
Bon, il demande, tu as joué à un moment où l'Afrique avait de super joueurs. C'était les années dorées du football africain avec les joueurs comme Eto'o, Nwankwo Kanu, Kadusha Buaya, tous ces grands joueurs qui ont élevé le statut du football africain. Mais avec ton parcours maintenant et du recul, qu'est-ce que tu penses de maintenant et de ce que c'était auparavant?
Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, il y a moins de talent.
This is a strong statement. He thinks that today there's less talent.
Parce que il y a beaucoup de joueurs qui ne viennent pas qui n'ont pas joué dans leur pays. Aujourd'hui, il y a beaucoup de binationaux.
Today we have many dual citizens who never played in their home country.
Donc, ce qui fait que le football brut, aujourd'hui, vous savez, aujourd'hui en Afrique, on n'a pas les installations qu'on a en Europe. Donc on perd un peu de ce qu'on apprend dans la rue, et nous sommes plus dans les structures. Les binationaux sont dans des structures qui sont, c'est bien structuré, mais on a moins de talent individuel comme c'était beaucoup à l'époque.
We are missing something very important. When you grow up in Africa, you play on the street, you play spontaneous football. When dual citizens, those are born and raised, or at least raised in the European system most of the time, they are in very good conditions, but are in very structured football as well. And they don't have the chance or the opportunity to grow their spontaneity and the imagination needed to have players like Eto'o or Mila.
Mais je pense qu'aujourd'hui, quand j'ai un peu écouté tous ceux qui nous ont précédés tout à l'heure dans leurs commentaires, dans leur vision, je pense que globalement, le football aujourd'hui africain avance à pas d'escargot. C'est-à-dire qu'on a beaucoup de retard.
After listening to all the panels and all the discussions, African football is moving forward, but is very slow, at a very slow pace today.
Et je pense qu'on doit aujourd'hui trouver des solutions. Il faut qu'on change les mentalités des présidents de clubs. On a la chance aujourd'hui qu'on a un président qui est Samuel Eto'o et qui va essayer de faire accélérer un peu le retard qu'on a.
We really need to change the mindset of club president. In Cameroon, we have the chance to have Samuel Eto'o, who is working hard to try to change or to make the mentality and reduce the gap today in African football.
Je vais prendre quelques exemples très concrets. Les clubs aujourd'hui, je parle du Cameroun parce que c'est le mieux que je connais. Les présidents de clubs n'ont pas la patience. Aujourd'hui, les clubs, souvent, ils pensent seulement à une équipe première, mais ils ne voient pas les centres de formation. Ils ne voient pas que le football commence à la base.
Yeah, you take the examples of most clubs, the president, people are running the clubs. They don't see the necessity to have youth teams, or they call them academy in general, but in France they call it training centre de formation. They represent the academies. They don't have that in mind. The only thing they want, and they're in a hurry, to just have the top team that's going to perform. They don't see the value of building a club from the bottom with youth.
Donc ils n'ont pas de projet sur le long terme.
Long term is not part of the way they process, no project, long-term project.
Ils veulent tout de suite gagner de l'argent, tout de suite, sans se dire que bon, il n'y a pas de relève, il n'y a pas de formateur. Donc ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui, on n'a pas de vision.
They are in short-term view, no young generation coming up, not enough or not at all. Coaches, everything that build a player, a formateur, and there's no vision. To summarize, there's no vision.
Alors ce que aujourd'hui notre président Samuel Eto'o fait, c'est qu'il a décidé de faire que pour qu'un club soit affilié à un club de première division, ce club-là doit avoir des catégories de jeunes.
What Samuel Eto'o is doing in Cameroon now, he's pushing all clubs to make them mandatory, to make it mandatory for every club to have youth categories to be in first division.
Il y a aussi un autre aspect que je voudrais parler, c'est l'aspect des infrastructures. Aujourd'hui, le Cameroun a eu la dernière CAN, Coupe d'Afrique des Nations, où le Sénégal a été champion. Ça a permis au Cameroun d'avoir des grands stades de football. Et ces stades-là vont permettre aux clubs de première division de jouer dedans, mais nous manquons de stades de proximité. En Europe, on voit dans tous les quartiers, on a plein de stades, beaucoup de stades à côté où les quartiers, les enfants peuvent aller jouer. Et ça, en Afrique, on n'en a pas.
In Cameroon hosted the African Cup of Nations this year. It was early this year. They built beautiful facilities. Clubs can play in those facilities, but what is missing is proximity facilities where kids can go, walk and play. That is totally missing today, and I'll add to that by saying that the street used to be the facility, yes, and even those parts are disappearing because they sold all the playground across the cities.
Voilà, à peu près. C'est bon.
Wow. Thanks, Bill. I take a pause with you for now, and I will go to Miriam. Right. This question is not because of your gender, but because it is very important, and because when we talk about football in Africa, the women's football is generally less talked about. And if you look at it all over the world, women's football is growing. Now, in the US and England now, they've implemented equal pay for all the players, irrespective of whether you're a male or female player. But in Africa, the female players are still, the women's football is still in the back. You have players being whole salaries. You have even when they go for competitions and tournaments, even up onto the World Cup, the kind of allowances that are given to the male part. If the male part is given, let's say, for example, $200 as a camping allowance per day, you see the women being given like $50 or $30, and at the same time, most of the times they are owed. What can you say about the women football, in Africa? and how you see it in the near future, and what can be done to accelerate, not just help the growth, but to accelerate the growth of women football in Africa?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity, and this is a very good question. Actually, personally, I'm not really involved in women football in terms of, when it comes to my academy, it's mainly male, but I'm very interested in the upgrading of the women football. And like you said, it's very the concentration is actually switching from them. They don't really concentrate on the women. They are always giving the concentration to the men football more. But I think it's up to the authorities to actually do something about it, because like you said, when it comes to the European, the US, and the rest, they are doing very well about that. But when it comes to Africa, always it's all about, for instance, Ghana, it's all about Black Stars. I'm not saying they should not they should not worry about Black Stars, but I think the women are also very important. So for me, I would say the federations should have policies that will actually be an advantage for the women as well. But that's not what you are seeing now. Usually it's all about the men, but I think they should give that equality to both women and men at the same time.
Let me take you on personally here. You have an academy, a football academy. Are you thinking or planning to have a female branch of that academy in the future?
Yes.
And if yes, what do you see, or where do you think the academy will go? How far do you think you can take that?
Okay. I think it's part of my plans. Actually, when I started, I had one female among them, which sometimes she feels a bit nervous and not too comfortable because they were all men, but I was still encouraging her. And I'm planning to form a female academy separate from the men, or maybe they can even train together. And I see it, I see myself to have this bigger than even the men, because in Ghana, for instance, I think it's in general for Africa. When it comes to female, personally, I have personal experience with it. I started when I was young, but I stopped at some point because it's not really accepted in the community. But I'm planning to make it in a way that people will embrace it and then accept it as the men soccer is accepted. When it comes to women, it's so difficult to see a woman to decide to say, okay, I'm having a football as my career. It's not easy. But now I'm thinking of helping them to have that mentality, to build that, to prepare their minds and ignore that kind of negative thoughts about women when it comes to soccer.
Before I go back to Bill, you touched on a very sensitive point. In the sense that you rightly said, an average female player, while growing up as a young lady, who takes an interest in football, is generally seen as a tomboy, as it were. There is this stereotype of, you might end up not getting married, independent, and all that. And at the end of the day, it has affected the potentials of many that could have been the rising star or future star in the female folk end up dropping that gift by the wayside as a result of the societal orientation of what people say about that. How do you think this kind of orientation can be changed, particularly in Africa?
I think it's up to we the individuals too. Like it's up to we the female individuals. It's very true what you said. I personally, I used to tell my friend I stopped football because like I began to look like masculine kind of, and I didn't want to, like that kind of perception. So I think it is the mentality. We just have to psych, we the female, you just have to psych yourself and then just go with it, flow with it. Whatever you want to do, I mean, it's passion. If you really want to do it, just go for it. You don't have to listen to whatever that is.
Mariama, je vais te faire un résumé rapide. Ça va? Tu as compris? Ok, ça va.
All right, great. Bill, back to you. Now let's talk about the World Cup here in Qatar. You've seen the performances of the African team. Senegal qualified for the round of 16 yesterday, and hopefully maybe Ghana and Morocco too, and probably Cameroon. Anything can happen. What can you say about this tournament so far, particularly for the African teams?
Ouais, les équipes africaines sont en bonne position. Ghana, Sénégal, puis le Cameroun peut-être. À ce point, qu'est-ce que tu penses du tournoi et la performance des équipes africaines?
Bon, malheureusement, le Cameroun, c'est l'équipe qui ne s'est pas encore qualifiée. Mais généralement, je pense que je vois qu'il y a un petit progrès, mais tout petit simplement, parce que j'aimerais un jour que les équipes africaines soient favorites. Mais elles ne sont pas favorites. Il y a 32 équipes. Dans les 32, on peut dire qu'il y en a 15 qui peuvent gagner la Coupe du Monde. Mais dans ces 15 équipes-là et tout, on ne mettra jamais une équipe africaine. Parce que nous sommes encore en retard. Même si aujourd'hui, on met 10 équipes qui vont participer, dans ces 10 équipes-là, il n'y aura pas une équipe qui sera favori. Heureusement, ce n'est pas toujours les favoris qui gagnent. Donc, il peut y avoir une équipe comme ça qui arrive jusqu'en finale. Mais ce ne sera pas tout le temps. Il faudra peut-être encore attendre 10 ans. Moi, j'aimerais qu'on puisse chaque année, tous les 4 ans, dire que 2 équipes africaines peuvent gagner la Coupe. Bon, ce tournoi-là et tout, aujourd'hui, il y a peut-être 3 équipes qui vont passer le premier tour. C'est bien, mais je pense que je vais revenir à ce que j'ai dit tout à l'heure. Il faut qu'on prépare ça avec nos jeunes enfants. Qu'il faut qu'on change toutes les mentalités.
Ok, try to not forget. Bill said that there's some progress. It's not major progress, but there's some progress. 3 teams may qualify for the World Cup. Unfortunately, Cameroon is not there yet. But looking at the tournament, there are 32 teams. They may put 15 teams as possible favorite to win the tournament, but there's no African team on that list. Although it's only 5 African teams, but there's no African teams. Even if they increase the number to 10 teams, we may not have any African team on the list of favorites. Accidentally or fortunately, maybe an African team can win. It's not excluded because we are talking about sport and football. But that doesn't mean that Africa will be favorites the next World Cup because the overall landscape hasn't changed much. But it is a possibility. It may take 10 or 20 more years for an African team to win again. Then going back to what he said earlier, there's more work to do at the ground to be able to raise African football to that position, to become a favorite. It's not a matter of Africa is going to win, absolutely, but being in the teams that people can consider rationally or irrationally as potential winners of the World Cup.
Last question, because of our time. Pele predicted about 20 years ago that an African team will win the World Cup soon. Down the line, the prediction hasn't come to pass. When do you think the prediction will come to pass? And which team or which country do you think will end up fulfilling the dreams of desires of the continent about lifting the tournament, the World Cup for the first time?
Pelé prédisait il y a 20 ans à peu près que une équipe africaine allait gagner la Coupe du Monde incessamment. Ça ne s'est pas encore produit. Quand penses-tu que ça va se produire? Et si ça se produit un jour, quel pays est en meilleure position pour être ce pays qui va gagner la Coupe du Monde sur le continent africain?
Oui, c'est vrai que Pelé a dit ça il y a 20 ans, mais il y a 20 ans. il y a 20 ans. Donc aujourd'hui, moi j'ai envie de dire, j'espère que dans 20 ans, on pourra gagner un titre de champion du monde. Alors, aujourd'hui, c'est les équipes qui sont au top, hein, qui sont souvent dans les derniers carrés des Coupes d'Afrique des Nations. Je vois pourquoi pas l'Égypte, le Cameroun, le Sénégal aussi, peut-être aussi l'Algérie. Voilà, même si aujourd'hui elle ne fait pas partie de la Coupe du Monde. Je pense qu'un jour là, c'est peut-être ces équipes-là qui auront le potentiel d'avoir le titre suprême.
Pele said that 20 years ago, say Africa could win a World Cup 20 years ago. Bill said that he can take the same statement and say maybe in 20 years Africa can win it. In terms of what team can win potentially on the continent, he talked about Cameroon, Egypt, Algeria, maybe Nigeria, Senegal. These are the countries we see with potential and consistency when we go to the African Cup of Nations. They are present. They are the last four teams playing the semi-final and finals, and those teams eventually will have the potential to win the World Cup if it happens maybe in 20 years.
All right, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Miriam. I would like to open the floor for just two questions, if there is any. All right.
Thank you very much. I think to support what you asked about 20 years ago, I think Kwame Nkrumah said it around 1960 that Africa will win the World Cup, and up to now it doesn't come to expectation. However, I think that there's a need for Africa to look at this or reconsider some of the things we have been doing. Which, for instance, they don't even take most of our research work seriously, which is one thing that has to be considered. And then also, the leadership has been our problem in terms of football. And if we don't move as a unit, rather than as segregation, everybody thinking about their country, making it's not going to work. By this time, we have to now come together as a unit so that we can fight for a common goal. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult. However, could you share some of your experience when you were playing, some of the challenges that you encountered as a player, so that it can become a lesson for the young ones coming who are desperate to play abroad?
Yeah. Il dit que Nkrumah avait dit en 68 que l'Afrique allait gagner, et puis Pelé l'a dit plus tard, et qu'on attend toujours en fait. Et que si ça doit arriver, il faut que beaucoup de choses changent, le leadership change, la façon dont on est structuré change, et qu'on travaille en ensemble, en tant qu'Africains, plutôt que de manière distincte, qu'il y a beaucoup à faire ensemble. Maintenant, est-ce que tu peux partager ton expérience en tant que joueur, jouant pour le Cameroun? Quels sont les défis que tu as rencontrés?
D'abord, ce qu'il a dit pour changer les choses, je vais rajouter qu'effectivement, la plupart des Africains, on ne pense pas au collectif, on pense d'abord à soi-même. Ça, c'est un vrai problème.
Ok. There's another strong statement here. He said that to change things, And this is a challenge for most Africans today. We don't think collectively. We are always thinking about individual interests. And this is a major challenge. It's a big problem.
Tu peux répéter sa deuxième question?
Quels étaient tes défis quand tu jouais pour le Cameroun, les problèmes ou les difficultés rencontrées?
Les difficultés qu'on a rencontrées avec l'équipe du Cameroun, malheureusement, c'était toujours des histoires de primes. Mais je sais qu'il n'y a pas seulement eu le Cameroun, j'ai aussi entendu d'autres équipes qui ont eu des histoires de primes. Et c'est souvent parce que vous savez que les gouvernements sont beaucoup impliqués dans la gestion, dans les finances du football. Donc ils sont obligés d'aider beaucoup les fédérations. Et souvent, quand on dégage de l'argent pour donner aux joueurs, à l'époque, moins aujourd'hui, beaucoup moins aujourd'hui, mais à l'époque, souvent, cet argent-là ne revenait pas aux joueurs. Donc, on a beaucoup eu souvent ce problème de prime qui a fait à ce que, au lieu de se concentrer sur la compétition, il fallait d'abord qu'on règle des problèmes extra-sportifs avant de jouer.
One of the main problems, the recurrent problem Cameroon had, and not just Cameroon, many African countries had, it's the bonuses. And the bonuses are paid generally by government. They will come out late, and when the government release the bonuses, the money for the bonuses, sometimes not all the money get to the players. The money goes somewhere else. And that prevents the team at the competition to focus on its performance, and they will be dealing and disputing, having disputes about bonuses even before they start the competition, and that is a big distraction. And to add to that, we all remember Zaire, DRC, first sub-Saharan African country at the World Cup in '74. 9-1 or against Yugoslavia. This story didn't come out, but it was essentially a bonuses problem, and the players boycotted that game and lost badly. But it's not an old issue. It's less today. Bill says it's less today. I think this World Cup we haven't heard anything about that yet. I hope not, but almost every World Cup we hear African teams with bonuses problem.
Et je pourrais aussi rajouter au niveau de l'organisation. On est souvent mal organisé, on aime souvent faire les choses en retard. Je crois que notre ami ici qui représentait la CAF, tout à l'heure il a parlé, bon vous avez vu, c'était qu'on devait commencer à 11h, on a commencé à 11h30. Donc tout ça, on doit évoluer là-dedans en fait, être ponctuel.
The organization is always missing, often missing. We always do everything last minute. I won't mention that we started a bit late today. But that has other challenges, but we started a bit late. But in general, we are not well organized. We are often late with what we do, and we really need to be more focusing more on how we organize the teams to perform.
I would like to apologize again for starting late today. You referenced that in your statement. All right.
I assume that this is the last question.
Yes.
So it will be a bit of encouraging question.
Okay.
You know that on the African level we have Mr. President George Weah. We have Samuel Eto'o became the lead of the Football Federation in Cameroon. And on the worldwide we have the IHF as the Handball Federation led by Mr. Hassan Mustafa from Egypt, from Africa. So the encouraging question is, do you think that FIFA one day will be led by an African person or no? I said it's an encouraging question before.
Il y a des Africains qui sont à la tête des grandes confédérations aujourd'hui. Hassan Mustafa, qui est le président de la confédération internationale de handball. Et il y a George Weah, qui est président au Libéria. Est-ce qu'un jour, on pourra voir un Africain président de la FIFA?
Avec moins de mafia, oui, je pense.
I think everybody caught that. Yes, with less mafia, there is hope.
et je pense que Samuel Eto'o, il vise cette place et j'espère qu'il y arrivera. Je pense que c'est son plan. Il est aujourd'hui président d'une fédération. Peut-être que demain, il sera le président de la CAF. Et après-demain, il va viser la FIFA. Et tel que je le connais, il est très ambitieux. Et peut-être que ce sera le premier. Peut-être qu'il y en aura d'autres, mais ce serait vraiment un progrès dans le monde du football qu'un jour un Africain soit président de la FIFA.
I say the best hope. It's Samuel Eto'o because of who he is. First, he's very ambitious. Now he's running his national federation. He's maybe looking at CAF as his next step, and maybe FIFA. If that it's probably one of the best person to be able to get into that position if the mafia is not there. I just added that one.
All right, I think we've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for everyone.